Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Never Alone. Let's continue. Now, weirdly, we really haven't had any increase in the number of people we're interacting with and dealing with, so our character Nuna here is more alone now than ever. Yes, she has the spirit of her fox friend in human form, helping out and all that, but let's just face it. If you're going to define the world as having a bunch of spirit animals that can be around you at all times, then you have to kind of assume that the world is flooded with spirit animals and then redefine alone to mean not being in the company of living things. In theory, if you believe in ghosts, then yes, nobody is ever alone because there's probably ghosts all throughout the entire world, just following people non-stop. It's weird, I could not get an angle there. Like, there really is only a few angles it wants to shoot at. The bolas want to shoot at. Yeah. Oh, don't fall off. So you can see the little snow track here only lets you go that far. So I guess the thing is to wait for the wind and jump. And then slide. And then we're into another area. Which, okay. Which means I ended my episode in the last time in a kind of a wrong place. It was dangerous to travel at any distances. All one could see was the mass of white swirling snow. Robert Cleveland, Nasaruk. I wonder if the bad man is Robert Cleveland. I don't think you would do that, though, in this story. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to have a last-second twist to say, oh, nope, the bad man is actually not such a bad man, and that's why we've been following and reading his quotes this whole time. We have 3 more insights, which I don't think I've missed any so far, so this is probably the end of the game at this point. But I still don't really know where this is going. Like, I feel like what it's going to be is that it's going to be, it was all a dream, and Nuna is just going to wake up and find her village perfectly fine, and she'll maybe have the fox character back as a actual living fox, and she'll have the bolas. I just don't think we're going to get anything super fancy, like she's going to bring her entire society and culture to a new, higher level and make it flourish. At a certain level, it almost would make sense if this entire story was just her going on her first hunt, and that she kills a polar bear or something and brings the meat back and feeds her tribe, which that is, we now know through the cultural insights, a big deal, a big accomplishment. It's just to keep yourself fed. There is something to be said about cultures that are like 100% built around, or are so resource starved that their entire focus is just surviving and feeding yourself. There is that whole concept of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and just its element of, I think I was probably supposed to move and not sink into the water here. Maybe I should have not started the tree moving until I was up here. Just trying to twist this. I would argue, whoops, it's still very easy to slip off because the wind blows you around, and your feet just don't really stick to the ground high enough. Yep. I would argue that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, not quite far enough there either, probably needs a little bit of a rethink. Just like, you need air, 3 minutes of air, or you'll die. 3 days without water, and you'll die, in best case scenarios. And I think you could potentially go about 3 weeks without food before you die. Whereas the Maslow's hierarchy of needs more starts with food and water as its lowest level. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I would argue, does not take into account like long-term emotional needs, and more kind of is making them just high priority wants, I guess. But yeah, when you have a culture and a society that is spending its entire time just hunting, trying to feed itself, and maybe make enough hunting money off of hunting, it doesn't leave a lot of room for growth. It doesn't leave a lot of room for artists and creatives. And you can kind of see in that this is the only video game I've ever heard of that seemingly has been made by a First Nations of any sort, a tribe. And I assume that this has in part been made by the assistance of a grant and extra funding. You also potentially run into the problem where there are some societies, or whether it's because of government narcissism or just cultural narcissism, that only want to make video games based on these specific ideas and cultures. You see it most prevalent in, say, Chinese approvals and censorship in video games, in that there is an entire list of Chinese acceptable Chinese stories to tell that they want told in forms of entertainment, in video games in particular, in part, a big part of that being that they want to have games that are based off of Chinese great novels like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the Monkey King myth. And so you see a lot of Chinese games in particular telling that same story over and over again, on top of which then there's also censorship of just not allowing skeletons, not allowing a lot of Western themes in general. And you see a ton of that censorship also in like movies and other forms of entertainment, and you see Hollywood tried a lot of times to pander to China and their censorship and their focus, and even in that, it didn't really work out to the benefit of Hollywood. What's the use of having billions and billions of people that might watch your movie when they don't actually watch your movie? And that is increasingly the problem with video games in China too, with their limitations on how many hours people can play, kids can play, or even adults can play. What's the point of trying to sell a game in China if literally you have maybe 3 hours a week at most that you're allowed by your government to play? Anyways, I've gone on a little bit of a side tangent here, but my point here is, if the makers of this game, who have done a decent job in making up their, I assume, first video game, were to make a second video game, I would definitely hope that they would be willing to tell a more fictionalized tale, and it is just really easy to die in some of these spots. Something that is not inherently just trying to do Never Alone 2. I wouldn't mind a Never Alone 2. You could tell a different story. You could definitely seek out a second tribe, if the makers of this game aren't like inherently connected to the Iñupiat tribe. I've totally forgotten the name of the tribe again. It just slips through my mind. I'm just not good at remembering proper nouns ever of anything. But yeah, I would almost say they need to make something that's more of a traditionally themed game, and then come out with Never Alone as an experiment to show that they can be diverse in their ideas. Unfortunately, the gaming industry, often a publisher would only want to fund a sequel to something that's already been proven. And as for gameplay style, these kinds of narrative, perhaps a little more simplistic platformers kind of ran out of steam. After Limbo, and that's a problem you often see, is that there will be one very critically well acclaimed and over talked about game by mainstream video game journalists in particular, and Limbo is definitely an example of that. And then you'll have the same company try to make a sequel and capture that lucky reception a second time, and it doesn't work. And you'll have unconnected companies try to steal the idea, and that doesn't work. Because the games usually are not just varied enough, or the idea is novel and unique for that one game. I don't know if I'm supposed to jump or what. I guess I'm supposed to jump. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do after that point, though. Definitely seeing spirits in these trees. But we still really just do not know where we're going. or why we're going. I can't pull this really in any direction, so I guess it's just a long jump. And of all the long jumps, you would think you'd have one that felt very cinematic, and I really haven't had anything like that. That they're not doing the whole time slowdown gimmick when you're doing a long jump or a cinematic cutscene. Alright, we'll get up here and then our Fox Spirit will drag this higher. There, we got a checkpoint. Yeah, there's... Okay, there's our bad guy, and this is probably our final boss fight. In which he's just chasing us and immediately get knocked over. So I think the move here is you've got to fly faster, get ahead, pull this. I guess maybe the idea was to just keep on flying after that point. I was thinking maybe you would pull that back down and stop him, but yeah, the game's not doing a great job of telling you when to swap or making it obvious when you should swap. And I'm still having a real problem. Real problem hitting the wrong buttons. And some of that certainly is just a testament to this game not being long enough and not just gradually having me work towards becoming an expert at controlling the game and swapping between two characters. Although I would say swapping between two characters in any game is kind of unlikely to be a hugely successful experience. It almost seems like this guy should just be a personification of fire itself. Thought I was stuck there. Apparently not. Oh. I could see how fire could be a real enemy in a game like, in a story like this. We're trying to get him to throw a fireball at these trees, which really isn't something that the game has taught us to do, so we can knock him in the water, which we assume is going to make him drown or freeze, even though we saw that we could swim. There is a point, I think, to ask here. What was the downfall of the evil guy? Like, why did he become the evil one? Why did he want the bolas? What part of the culture did he betray? It's weird that there's just 3 of these. We may straight up have just missed 3 owls throughout the game that were hidden a little bit more. There is also room, I guess, to find out what was causing the blizzard. Manslayer, no. I got another achievement. But yeah, since they're not really characterizing Nuna that much, and she is just a generic girl in the story, then maybe they should instead characterize the bad guy and at least make him understandable, if not sympathetic. Again, I pressed A and it didn't play. It just crashed back to the screen.
The recurring type of character in Iñupiat stories is the manslayer. And the manslayer is kind of this bad guy. And I think really what's at risk when the manslayer comes into story is the livelihood of individuals and the whole community. And so the manslayer is really used as a way to say, don't act only for yourself. Always hold the community in your heart. Oftentimes in these stories, there is one person that
notice this character's name
and what
plate
this humble person will represent, who faces that manslayer, is a return to order, a return to true living in the community. And it just takes that one person. It could just be that one person that can help to change everything. Because everyone wants to live a good life. Everyone wants to have a good community.
So they really should have used the manslayer title, even if it just popped up above the guy's name, head when he first appeared. There was something interesting there. The lady's title didn't have the bar and the different color on the title. Let's just hit play and show it again, which almost makes me think
type of character in Iñupiat
she doesn't have
and the manslayer is
a
kind of this bad guy. And I think really what's at
First
risk
Nation's name, last name,
comes into story is the livelihood
Amy
of individuals and
Frieden
the whole
here. See,
community.
no
And
bar,
so
no different color.
Really
the other guy does have a bar and a different color. So I wonder if the bar and different color is not a last name or a tribe name so much as it is a indication of an Eskimo name,
will represent,
which is or Iñupiat name. So maybe he's named as Ishmael in
community, and it
when referring and talking to English people, and he's called something different when talking amongst his own tribe.
Change everything.
Why, though, I have to ask, would that not be explained in the first cultural insight as far as just different names? Like way back here, shouldn't the very first one be, here's why we're using this font? Because that seems really, really crazy if that is the case, to not explain that. Yeah. It's a little crazy to name your enemy, the enemy character, at the end. And yeah, it does seem like there's probably just going to be a little bit more and then we'll be done with this main story. He approached the spot and saw that for some reason the blizzard seemed to be originating from a small tundra meadow Robert Cleveland Nasruk. Another thing to point out there is the Manslayer, as they describe him, is a character that is going against the established authority, the established order of the tribe, whereas the heroine in the story, or the hero in the story, the protagonist in the story, is always pushing everybody back to living as a group, as a tribe, and back to those conservative values and not having any change or anything new happen. Which, yeah, that is something you would see in any tight-knit small communities as in cultures, is that the culture needs some level of social pressure to maintain the culture. Otherwise people will just have their small fights and go off in different directions and never meet again. It's undoubtedly super easy for the idea of leaving the tribe to pop up in the minds of the new generations of Alaskans in general. Like, Alaska, because of the fishing, whaling, can be a decent place to work and make some decent money, but it then comes with a heck of a lot of negatives and caveats to that as far as living in Alaska. And if you are not part of a tribe, or if you don't feel like you're a part of a tribe, or if you don't care to stay a part of a tribe, it'd be very easy to say, hey, let's go to mainland, let's go down to Washington State and fish there and be part of mainland United States. Same is true for Native American reservations, where you can either stay in the reservation and live that life, or you can leave the reservation and live a more standardized United States citizen life. This Robert Cleveland character, though, really should show up as a character. Let's walk all the way to the left and see if we can continue to go to the left or not. Is it just the wind that's going to blow me to the side, or... Yeah, there is a permanent wind that pops up on the left side. We're back now to snow white snow and a blue background. We're not in the starry night, so we've gone full circle, basically. You know, what's funny is this gives me an opportunity to, the snow is more melted here, compare this game to Dishonored, which I wouldn't have thought you could make that comparison at first, but while it's not a huge focus, the culture of Dishonored is also a culture of having a lot of whaling and whale oil playing a big role, more than you see here. Definitely feels like instead of just being swallowed by a whale in that middle section of the game, you should have ended up seeing a whale, or at least doing fishing. I could see needing the fish, or at least showing her fish. There are elements that you would expect to see, like snowshoes and like and dogs and wolves that just aren't here. Spears, knives, fire, igloo building. They all feel like things that should be mentioned or depicted. It seems like the game is almost going out of its way to not have elements that I think should be here, even if maybe they're a little bit stereotypical. They definitely wouldn't have gone out of their way to not use the word Eskimo, except for that one time in their cultural insight. Once again, we just have a segment here where it's really, really easy to die. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, I guess you can just play that way, and then the game is really just playing for you. There's an abruptness, certainly. If you die, you can just tap the A and reset a little too fast. So that's a weird thing to say, but it does turn out to be the case. It might be a little silly, but I'm surprised that there isn't a snowman that you see at some point in the game. Even some sort of snowman. Almost certainly, I would assume that their children build snowmen and do snow angels and things like that. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's too cliche or just too commonplace. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't really celebrate Christmas, since that wouldn't be their religion or culture. So it's a giant rock creature of some sort.
Niverksiarolo kangit ka ibaktane. Inyuk pasumarok. Ulemak tuahalu apun. Siamittaanra. Asi pihirun silamun. Siamayaktitsu. Siamayaktin maung apun. Ano makkuahariga asi aganiroktillu tunganun. Niverksiarolo ay makaveno. Davura kangit ka summan aganirootilanga.
And I guess we're not gonna just talk it out with this giant man.
Kanurulunga takpikuaneakpik. Iverksiarolo kollahaaktok. Abulait kan atauchikun mayokonearik. Kiwa diriganneak.
I'm not sure which way I should go first. So, one thing they said in the insights is that animals are supposed to be as important or even more important than humans, but there's this human pride, I would call it, certainly, that the monster in the story is humanoid and the animals bother to turn themselves into humanoid forms, and that is special in magic. So I'm gonna just run this way and see if we find the last owl over in this area. Nope. So let's watch this insight. We're clearly at the nearing the end of the game.
With regard to the environment, the blizzards have been one of the key elements that have impacted the survival of people, especially in the hard winter. We know a blizzard is coming when the moon is starting to get fuzzy. We also look at the stars. When the stars are twinkling fast, we know a storm is approaching. we look to the clouds in the sky to give us direction the storm is coming from. We learn these as children by observing weather on a daily basis.
I'm a little surprised that there isn't more like cave dwelling or underground living in Alaska, but I'd imagine the permafrost just makes it really, really difficult to dig, because my natural first thought would be get out of the wind, get out of the exposure of it, build entire igloo tunnels and cities, potentially, even. Let's see. What can we find and where? Yeah. I could definitely see that being a thing, but obviously if that was a thing, then polar bears would be living in caves, and I don't think they're really living in caves either. Okay, my question here is, are these natural, like, climbing walls? Move the fox out of the way. Yep, those are natural climbing walls. Good to know. So what's the next step here? Bring that down, I guess. And then come back here. So this is, it's supposed to be the culmination of everything we've done up until this point, which unfortunately isn't really that much, so it's kind of easy for it to be the culmination of everything you've done up until this point. A little too easy. Although, in fairness, I don't know what more I really would have wanted. Just potentially more gameplay, more platforming overall. Like hunting, fishing, building of an igloo. Laying traps, perhaps checking of traps. Maybe finding more than just one spirit assistance animal could have been a thing. We do see all of these spirits, and they don't consistently feel like they're playing enough of a role, that they're the solution to one puzzle, whereas there's an alternate version. Did she die? Yes, she did. Yeah, it feels like there's an alternate version of this game where you would have had several boss fights, and after fighting or hunting certain animals, you would get the spirit and the assistance of those animals. And then that might give you more of a Metroidvania-esque platforming ability that allowed you to move around easier or reach areas you could not reach before. Not sure if I was supposed to bow roll. too far away. Yeah, I suppose you wouldn't have to change too much if there was just a crawling challenge animal you needed to hunt first before you could do the crawling ability, and a swinging creature that you needed to hunt before you could do the swinging ability. This is the second time also we've been inside the body, effectively, of some fictionalized creature. We may unlock the last cultural insight just by beating the game. Otherwise it would be fairly irritating if we missed the last one. Right. We just have to jump, I guess. Wait for the wind to point that way, and we got a checkpoint. And then we're gonna just squeeze and hope to not get crushed. Now, here's a thought. Why would this guy be crushed? Like, why would he have any physical body at all? I guess he doesn't get crushed, but I guess it doesn't help because as soon as you slide, there's spikes on the other side. Okay, so you wait till this opens up and then you jump. And then we'll jump over here and get a checkpoint. The game effectively would have turned into too much of a hidden object game if it was all about finding these spots and shooting them with the bolas. There could be a lot more of that, but you would fairly quickly change the meaning of the game and the focus of the game. So it's saying jump. How? Oh, we've just got to time it almost perfectly. Oh, and the spikes can get you. It felt like I could just squeeze by there, but obviously not. And you don't want to make the final level too difficult, where people would rage quit at the last second here. Although I do have a slight concern that maybe the Foxtails part of this game might be considerably more difficult platforming, and that's another thing we'll have to find out when we do the Foxtails story. It could be short, it could be extra difficult. There's room for a lot of different things. And then we once again have a issue where we're dying over and over again. Alright, well, I'm gonna pause the recording for a second and just run to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that, but better to finish the game without having that extra pressure of needing to run to the bathroom. I definitely am gonna have to also figure out what's going on with my check video macro that I have programmed, because I came back to... Oops. Can we recover from that? Apparently not. Yeah, I came back to like it playing a video that I think is not the last video by any means. Maybe 3 or 4 videos before, since I'm recording all of these in roughly the same session, taking decent breaks in between each one. I imagine part of the problem is that this game has parentheses in the name, and that's creating a weird file name that VLC doesn't want to deal with. I hope that's the issue, and it isn't a bigger issue of entire footage being lost. It shouldn't be that, but who knows. Meanwhile, the problem at hand here is we're right at the end of the game and we have a difficulty spike. Just a really easy place to die at. It really should have been smooth sailing completely for this game after defeating the bad man. He's clearly the established bad guy and the humanoid character. So I have to get up there and I have to then remember to wait until it swings down to give myself enough time. Like this section, well, it probably should exist, does. That really should just be almost a cutscene as far as how easy it should be. I just hope I'm high enough. Okay. So we'll just wait until it swings downward, then we'll jump and run.
Mayok tua kanya lakaming kangan ng nyuk pasu. Nibeak siya karualuk isumixok shurukraute lamenik.
What must she do? Is she gonna kill this character somehow? Or is she gonna calm him somehow, sing a song? You almost think it should just be that she pulls out a drum and starts singing and calming him. I could see that actually being the gameplay mechanic for defeating all the spirits, is that you're calming the spirits. Now, I did say in the previous episode it would be a shame if this just turned into industrialization being the enemy and that was causing the blizzards, or global climate change being the enemy. So I do have... It is nice to just see it's more of a mystical creature that's our antagonist. I really wouldn't mind if she could just drum and sing a song and calm down the spirit and convince him to stop doing what he's doing. Nope. She's gonna steal his weapon. So the idea of stealing is wrong is not playing a role here, and the idea of like growth not particularly happening as a character. Wow, just get swung completely off the screen. what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to hit it with my bolas? Or am I supposed to grab it? Wow, it seems like you only have one chance to jump, so jump early. And this ice definitely looks like something that you should hit with the bolas. Come on, bring that down quickly so you don't get smacked. And then there's a foreground platform here that we're gonna land on. So his axe here, his pick. It's crazy though that a daze is not a cultural insight. You're using this word and they didn't really define the word. It's also a little crazy, I would say, when you have this direct back button to the cultural insights, that there isn't also just a dictionary of translated words. So I don't know which way I'm supposed to jump here. Yeah. Not really sure what I was supposed to do in that case. It seemed like they want me to jump forward. Like, he's not swinging and shoveling at the moment, and so why are we getting the wind? Anyways. And see, I guess that was the solution, and that's a very abrupt solution with no cutscene. I guess we'll get a cutscene in a second, but there's no text here. And, yeah. I don't feel like this is really a journey that has been set up well for our main protagonist to sacrifice herself for the village, which would probably make a lot of sense culturally if she did sacrifice herself to the village. You could see this even being a fictionalized story of what happened to some girl who left the village and ended up frozen to death in the tundra. But if the idea is of sacrifice, the only character that really has sacrificed here is the fox spirit character, and I don't really think you can even say him accidentally killing himself, or no, the fox spirit accidentally being killed by the bad man, the manslayer, really counts as a sacrifice.
Akpaliramik tikinyak tua ulimautek pak. Tiyumang ulimautek pak akralik tuk nat kayakatahutik. Iñupasum malikataloga angulait ka ukilavlune.
So we're getting a chase sequence? Apparently not. And we still have like one more insight that we haven't unlocked. Unless we missed it. Yeah. It feels very much like this game is a little too constrained by this story that's being told. Where maybe some poetic and artistic license could have been applied to make this more of a video game, or you do the better thing and you just make this a documentary that would have aired on TV, which for the length of these 24 insights, if each one of them are about a minute long, there you would have enough footage alone for a 22-minute TV episode. A PBS episode would probably be closer to 26 or 28 minutes long. So, but even at that, you still would probably have enough footage with credits. And even if you needed to stretch for time, you could have had the drummer do a full performance of his drumming. I'd actually like to see that happen. in the credits. So away he went with the Oddsey as the big man shoveled the snow, creating blizzard after blizzard. However, the big man soon saw him as he grabbed the Oddsey and ran off with it. What's funny is the story is saying he, so either this is a translation error and maybe in their language they don't have gendered pronouns, or this is very possibly a case where they felt it would be more relatable or more acceptable to just gender swap the protagonist of the story. But if they're willing to do that and make that big of a change, why not make some more changes for the video game's sake? Robert Cleveland, Nasruk. Again, maybe his First Nations name is Nasruk, and maybe his English name is Robert Cleveland. Alright. It also feels like there should have been two giants. One shoveling the whole time, making the blizzards, and one picking ice. Otherwise it really doesn't make sense that the wind was still blowing when he was clearly focusing on he was clearly focused on the idea of picking the ice instead of shoveling ice. You never actually saw the character shoveling the ice. Yeah. And we're effectively just going back where we came in this chase sequence, which, like most chase sequence, is going to just turn into a boring, repetitive experience because I'm going to end up dying and failing multiple times. This is one of those points where potential QuickTime events might be better. That way you just have to mash buttons to feel like you're actually playing, and the mashing of the buttons may not even actually create a scenario where you would fail. It's not really adding much to the game to have all this going on. It would seem like you could hit more of that. I feel like it's just really, really dangerous. Do we have any checkpoint system here at all? Feels like it's just rather dangerous to try and leave your platform, so you are better just staying where you are. It also feels like my platform was lowered here as a way of indicating that that's where it really should have been. We don't know anything about the spirit animals and all of that, so we don't know if there is a point where this fox spirit could in any way interact with the giant ice man. Whoops. Almost made it all the way through. Although it seems to me like the giant Iceman is just a living creature, not a spirit creature. guess at a certain level you might want to just have an ability to fly on the wind. Since we're already gliding on the wind, it would just take it to the next step to be able to fly on the wind. But then you would be playing a very different kind of game, a flying game, which there aren't really a lot of those that are good. There's one series of games that are the exact same tech demo basically sold over and over again on Steam called, I think it's called Avery. And you'll see a new Avery, then a subtitle, and it's just the same asset flipped bird flying in an asset flipped open world. And then, yeah, there's very little other flying games. There's, particularly for PC, you don't have like Star Fox, Pilot Wings, anything old on Steam like that. You have Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is more of a technical flying game. So one fairly short chase sequence in which you didn't even really see the monster. You could definitely see how there's would have been a problem there if the giant ice creature was even at the edge of the screen as a consistent threat. He probably should have been at the edge of the screen as a consistent threat, but you would have very quickly seen that he would only take a step forward every time you took a step forward, and that he really wouldn't ever overrun you. Or you make the game where he can overrun you, and it just makes that chase sequence even more of a problem, which all rounds back to the idea of that really should have just been a cutscene, maybe with some quick time events, maybe not. He threw down his shovel, climbed up from the flat tundra, and ran down after Kunu saw Yuka, but Kunu saw Yuka was too fast, says Robert Cleveland Nazaruk. Which I don't know if you really need to credit every quote to a person if every quote except for maybe one in the game is coming from the same person. So now we're back to the spirits, the Northern Light spirits. So we continue the chase sequence. This inherently, I guess, means this entire platform was designed, this entire level was designed to be run in both directions. What I wouldn't like, however, here is if all of a sudden we have to run the entirety of the level of the game back. And there they effectively tempted me to fail by having the protagonist have to stand up while firing. Of course, when she stands up, she gets blown over, and look at that, there is an actual blizzard that is coming against us, so I've got to move fairly fast here. There's not a lot of time to do this the long way. Now the Northern Lights are just going to grab you and kill you. So this is going to be just a nightmare. You've got to prove a level of skill that the game really shouldn't require. To do this, to hopefully come over here and drag this as far as possible this way, and hopefully not get grabbed by the other northern light character. After this section, do we get swallowed by the whale again? Or are we just going to eventually say we escaped and she's just going to naturally run back to her village, and then the blizzards will stop, which obviously the blizzard winds won't really stop. Off he had run with the adze in his hand. The big man chased him without catching him. There's clearly a focus in this story that also needs to be pointed out, in that they are almost certainly hiding some gender norms and gender roles in their culture. Like that there is the female protagonist in the story is very possibly a front to the culture of this tribe that almost certainly has only the men going out to hunt after a certain age, or only men being able to be high-level members of the clan leadership. Is this ice gonna crush me? Do we really need the game to make us go through the entire game a second time though? Particularly since the Foxtails element is here. I assume the game probably didn't originally have the Foxtails story. No, though I guess I have to condemn the game for doing a bad job of even whitewashing sexism, if that's really what they're doing, because they're doing this like direct quote thing where he's still the direct quotes are male pronouns, where if they were going to really change things, they would have changed that too. Polar bear comes back. I guess in part just to confirm that the polar bear doesn't die. But we're also back to the situation where we are dying when we fall in the water. So if we were to go further back to the next section where we are swimming underwater in the belly of the whale, which I guess maybe the argument is that the water is warmer in the belly of the whale, it would again break that concept. Blizzard Man now instead of Big Man. You're not being consistent with the name.
ilak tokkahone adurraksirok. Kunok sayuka hange ule mautiga kailige ula kuleange ani yubi isiga kisimea kenyet paten.
What does that mean? You will see caribou feet. Does that mean footprints of caribou? The owl man not playing as big of a role as I thought he might have been. So yeah, he seemed happy even though she broke his weapon, which is confusing, and that just ends the story in a weird way, which, yeah, that sometimes happens, is that you get these different cultural stories, and because it's not the normal style story you're expecting, it just has a different moral or a different twist to it. Here in the quote, they're back to the big man. The big man has seen his Adzi being tossed up and out the skylight, because this made him so happy he burst out laughing like this. Kanuk sayuka arai ha ioi hi. Robert Cleveland one more time, and we now have the final unlock of the cultural insights, which thank goodness we didn't miss any. This, though, I'm not sure if this is going to be.
With the story of Kunuk Sayuka, told by Robert Cleveland, it's just a masterwork. It's a well-known story among the Iñupiat people, and in our case, of producing a video game that really reflects indigenous heritage. It captures the imagination, and it's something that you have a very specific kind of task to do. But there's a blizzard, and it is just a non-stop blizzard that is overpowering the people, and there's one man that wants to figure it out. And in our case of the story, it's a girl that wants to find the source of that blizzard. The blizzard man, it's like that is the physical embodiment of an element of nature. And so there's a person that needs to go up and take away that adds, that's chipping away that snow.
In that community, the person least expected is the one who stands up and makes the difference.
Humility is something that we value, and where that comes from is the idea that you are not the biggest thing in the world. And when you live in an extreme environment like where the Inuit reside, you're at the whim of the environment, of the climate, of the animals. You can be as prepared as you can, by learning from your elders that, you're not the biggest force in the world.
And weirdly, they ran out of things to say. Also, I got an achievement probably for viewing all of the insights. So yeah, no real explanation as to why they changed the gender on the character. Also, either the person telling this story, Robert, is dead, or he just didn't want to be involved in it. Although Robert very well may be the narrator throughout the game, but then why not show him, at least at the end here? Even if he doesn't speak any English at all, why not at least show him? And it's a cruel thing to say, but I have to throw it out there that if this is their best pick for a story, as far as the Inuit people, or one of their tribes, it's not the Epic of Gilgamesh, it's not Homer's The Odyssey, it's just not that long, and without that kind of length, you just don't have quite enough to make a video game on it. The video game aspect here feels incredibly unnecessary. And it really doesn't feel like it adds too much to it. You could have easily made this more of a animated short or an animated movie. Honestly, it's long enough to be an animated movie. And then you could have had higher budget on the animation, tighter controls on how the story is depicted. You could see potentially having several musical numbers play of their native songs and drumming play in a animated movie instead. Or if you can't get the funding for that, just having this be a 1 hour or 30-minute documentary to tell the same story would have probably been better too. It almost certainly is a case that they got a grant to make a video game, so they made a video game, even though this story doesn't really fit a video game as well as it really should. And yeah, again, it's cruel to say that if their pick of story is not good enough, but that is how I feel. And the only thing I guess they could probably have done is had more like historical fiction stories and told multiple stories to try and flesh it out and tell different kinds of tales. I suppose it could have been a little worse. This could have been an asset flip survival game. There aren't actually any survival games I know of that are set in like Alaska in the snowy tundra area. Almost all asset flip survival games are set in forests and more tropical weather, so there could be an experience there, but that wouldn't help tell this narrative any better. It would just make it worse. The other thought certainly is that if this company was funded enough to make another game, maybe they just sell the development of that game, that next game, as being made by a bunch of the Iñupiat people, if that's the name of their tribe. Again, I forgot it after about the first hour. They didn't say it often enough. First Nations people in general working on the game, and that might work fine. There actually is a decent argument to have a video game programming company that is fairly successful and fairly big in Alaska, because if you're inland enough, you're not going to run into like hurricanes, and honestly I don't think you're going to run into hurricanes that often anyways up in Alaska. So you would just have to worry about blizzards and having consistent power, but you would have the benefit of decent cooling if you actually needed cooling, that much cooling on your computers. And you would have the benefits of a society that doesn't have a lot of other things it can do during the month of November when there is no sunlight. So sitting around and programming things for that month might be a little bit more efficient. I imagine programmers might very well enjoy the cooler aspects, but honestly it probably is more negatives than it would be positives to try and move a video game company up north just for cooling reasons and cheap land reasons. I assume it's cheap land there. Let's go ahead and finish the story and see if there's anything more. Imagine this will just go to credits.
Ilanin inyo negalo ako with. Lang agalo ako with. Ay suli ko with. It kaksakay ma. Asita bra tao to kunay kasok. Tat pao nga. Tak tuwa mo sila mo. tabratain na nasum unep karamang tusangariga.
So the narrator says Nazaruk told the story, and so he's repeating it. Yeah, apparently his daughter gave permission, so Robert Nazaruk Cleveland probably did. And then the foxtail story is inspired by two coastal brothers as told by a different person with permission of the family. So these are both, that's going to be a different story completely. There is the narrator is James Mumigan Nagik, and so we don't ever see him in the cultural insight things, which is kind of a shame. And we have a different narrator in the Foxtales. There's a problem in once they had a human-faced fox character, is that it opens up the idea that there might have been some romance between the fox spirit and the girl, and it's just not something, an avenue or angle you would want to even slightly imply there. It's also, I think, a problem that only at the very end of the game do you see her making a campfire. So as we're looking at the credits here and listening to the music is quiet piano piece, where I was thinking it would almost certainly be a drumming native piece. This could be a native song piece too, who knows, but we'll get, maybe they'll mention it in the credits. As we look at the names, the idea here is just how many of these names feel like they are part of the Inuit tribe or First Nation tribe in general, and how many of these names are just standard white guy style names from European countries. Yeah, and I would say the majority of them seem to be just European descent names. Amy Frieden there was an executive producer, so she put herself in the interview cultural insight sections. I am at the end once again reminded that this was a Unity game, which Unity certainly made it easier, I'm sure, to make this game, whereas had they had to jump a more difficult hurdle to program a game using a more difficult engine, maybe this wouldn't have been a video game, and instead it would have just been a movie. Learning Science and Integrated Support Team from the ASU Studio Center for Games and Impact in the Mary Lou Fulton Teachings College. I assume ASU is Arizona State University. Then there's additional development from even more people. Arguably, there is way too many people involved for such a small project. Funding partners here: Cook Inlet Tribal Council, Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, Rasmussen Foundation, City Sea Enterprises, and Eline Ventures. So this feels like the Tribal Council basically doing their own public PBS type thing, public funding of this game in part. It's always funny when you see somebody use an open source font license. So yeah. There's perhaps an unfairness, certainly, around public funding of one game from one culture that would not happen as far as public funding for other cultures. There are microcultures, say in Chicago and Compton in the mainland of the United States, and it would be fairly laughable if they tried to public fund the development of a video game out of Compton or Chicago specifically, since most game development in mainland United States is done out of California or Redmond, Washington. And a pretty abrupt ending there on the credits too. And yeah, plenty of other cultures, plenty of African countries that their public governments and public services would not have even the amount of money necessary to develop a video game. Personally, I've always felt like African cultures, which are very diverse and often very separate, it seems, from each other, have probably a lot of stories like this story to tell, but it's just too difficult to take those stories and either make them a video game or even make them cross over the ocean and leave Africa. Again, maybe people are just too busy surviving. Alright, so not terrible. I mean, very much an educational game. If you don't like education, then that's not going to work for you. I assume I've gotten all the achievements for the main game, so let's see. Let's go ahead and hit play and just see what we could have done otherwise. We now have a chapter select if you for some reason wanted to play a specific chapter again. Maybe if you did miss something, that's nice as far as finding all the cultural insights, but we played thoroughly enough. There really is no call to action with all these cultural insights, though. That the implication here is that the Nuna people and the First Nations tribes should just stay the same. It's a call to, it's a very subtle call to just conservatism. Don't evolve your culture, don't abandon your culture, don't move to mainland United States and just become a standard U.S. citizen living a standard U.S. citizen life. Let's see. The Suomi language was the one I thought might be the Nuna language, but I just don't think they actually support their own language, which is interesting. But that is, I guess, pretty much just a call to action there. Since this is such an educational game, it would make more sense to have some references or how to have some link to seek out more information. And we just don't really have any of that. I imagine none of these settings are any different for Foxtails. And yeah, since I didn't play the game in co-op mode, I didn't experience that experience, but that almost certainly would have made the game a little bit easier if I did have a co-op player. But then that would really require two people to be willing to play the game all the way through. Yeah, and it looks like we're gonna just have one more episode with 5 insights, unless this Foxtails part is just really, really difficult, or you just don't collect that many cultural insights. It certainly is an interesting thought if you are a standard United States citizen from European descent that is raised, or at least raised around, Judeo-Christian values. What would this game really have been like had the story not been the story we saw, but instead it was something like the Stations of the Cross, or the entire story of Jesus, or the entire story of Moses, in a platforming way? Like that would be fairly weird if you were playing as Jesus, platforming through a game. But it's really, that comparison's not that off from what this is. They're not inherently worshipping the character you're playing as, but they are turning her into a hero. Even though I would say she probably isn't going through that whole hero's journey concept, which the hero's journey concept is just a rough structure and suggestion, not something that has to always be the case. Anyways, I feel like I will just ramble on if I let myself, so this is a good point to end the game, in this episode of the game, and then we'll come back in the next episode and play Foxtails. Then we'll probably end the game, unless it unlocks something else. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.